Hi everyone, this is Adam Fisher, and throughout this video I'm just going to quickly show how to use the Illustrator software and save vector graphics. We like to call them vector graphics from Illustrator. We can call them vector. They're also known as like .eps files and or just .ai files. And I'll kind of go through all three of those classifications here in a second, so you're more aware of when to save it and when to actually send certain files over to your clients or art director in the future. And then I'll also show how to place this vector graphic in other software like Photoshop, InDesign, and such. First thing first, when you're in Illustrator, what I like to do personally is just go to File, New. And when I create a new file, it doesn't really matter what size of pixels you choose. I'm going to switch points to pixels here. And notice that we switched to PX. It doesn't really matter because it is a vector graphic. So once it's placed in other software, you can scale it to as large as you want. Just clean, crisp quality, okay? So I just like personally doing 500 by 500 and keep it pretty simple. You can name it if you choose, but like I said, this is just a little lesson. Let's go ahead and kick it off 500 by 500 pixels. And your stage should look something like this, okay? Nice, well uniform stage to work with. Let's look at the toolbar. So the toolbar looks like this. We've got two selection tools. We've got a selection tool here. That hotkey is V, and then we got the other one, which is direct selection tool A. Let's start with shapes, okay? And then we'll go and figure out what these tools can do. So I'm going to start with the shape tool. Let's just select a rectangle. I'm going to click and drag and create it. Now when I created it, notice that it created a white rectangle with a black stroke. So up top, you're going to see that I've got a fill selection and also got a stroke selection, okay? And then we have a point size as well. So if I select my selection tool, which is hotkey V, right after create the rectangle, click and drag and select it, just boost up the stroke point size. You'll notice that I can add more boldness to that stroke. Also have different stroke settings I can choose from. Pretty cool stuff. Okay. Direct selection tool works like this. So any shape I create in Illustrator, if I select the direct selection tool and I deselect and then left click somewhere on the edge, notice that the points come up white. And then I can left click drag, select that point, then click and drag the point, and I can change its shape very easily. Control Z will undo and back me out. Go back to the selection tool. I have control handles, so I can squeeze it. Okay. I can squeeze it from any end. All right. Or I can left click and drag the corner and I can scale it larger. If I hold shift, like Photoshop, I can left click and drag and scale down this corner, and it maintains uniform scale. All right. Let's take a look at some other shapes here. I got a rounded rectangle tool. I'm going to click and drag and bring this one out. This one's pretty neat. So a rounded rectangle actually allows you to smooth out your corners. Now if I hold the Option on Mac or Alt key on PC and right click in the center, I get a submenu that comes up and I can change the corner radius. So if I say, let's go 90 px, okay. The update's made. I'm going to grab the selection tool, deselect, and then just left click and drag that new shape out. Notice the how the corners are more smooth. I can delete the first one. Select and just hit and delete on my keyboard. And grab another tool. Let's look at the ellipse tool. This is a perfect circle. Left click drag. Alright. Same applies with the direct selection tool for any of these shapes. So I'm going to deselect. I'm going to left click on the edge to activate. And notice that this one has what's called Bezier handles. So I can warp and reshape this this oval if I wanted to. I can move these points around, reposition them. Now, something that's really neat is either Option on Mac or Alt on PC. If I just left click and drag, and while I hold that key down, one of these handles, I can just shape one side. All right. We'll go back to the selection tool. Let's go ahead and delete this. Let's take a look at some other shapes. We even got the polygon tool. This one base looks like a hexagon. 6 sides. Same applies with these tools. Direct selection allows you to reshape. Some other tools here. Star tool. This one's really great. I'm going to left click and drag, and before I release my click on my mouse, I'm going to hit the up arrow. I can add points to my star, or hit the down arrow and take away. So it goes to triangle. Direct selection tool. Once again, select point, reshape, change your shape very easily. One of the really fun tools I like in Illustrator personally is the perspective grid tool. So if I turn this on, let's go left click and turn this thing on, a perspective grid comes up. It's 2-point perspective. And if I go to view and go down to perspective grid, I can switch to which grid I want to use here. So I can go, we're in 2-point right now, I can go to 1-point, switch to 1-point. Let's go back to view. Even switch to 3-point. Okay. If I create a shape, let's say I'm gonna click and hold down the star tool as the last one to use and go to rectangle. And left click and drag across one of these views. Let me switch back over to 2-point just so you kind of understand how these work. Left click and drag across the grid, it will build that shape to that perspective. And I can just select the shape and go on up to fill, change to a new fill color. I can have this tool activated. Let's see, the perspective grid tool. I can click and hold it down, go out to perspective selection tool, and then allows me to select which side I want to build on. So I can say I want to go on this side, hence I can build a rectangle over here, and it'll build on that side. Go back to my selection tool, select it, change the fill very easily. So I can basically make three-dimensional shapes. I can do that in any view. I'm not going to go through all of them because, like I said, this is a short little video, just kind of give you an idea and understand of Illustrator. Let's go and delete these. We want to turn this this perspective grid off. I'm going to go to View, Perspective Grid. I'm going to go to High Grid and get back to Start. Let's look at some other tools. Pen tool. This is a really neat one. I'm going to click and hold this one down and select Pen tool. I can change to whatever fill color I want. Let's do like a blue. I'll left click and start a point on stage. So if I left click with the pen tool, it will start a point like so. Then if I left click and drag, it allows me to shape this path, and this path can become a shape. So I can build any kind of shape I want using Illustrator here. And if I click on the original point, it closes that path. And hence, just like what we just learned, if I grab the direct selection tool, select that point, left click and drag it, I can use the Bezier handles to reshape very easily. Grab the selection tool. I can just left click and drag the corner. If I hold shift, maintains uniform scale, bring it down, move it around. Let's add some point value to it very easily. I'm going to delete this. Let's look what else we have. We have what's called the line tool. Okay, line segment tool. And I'm going to go ahead and line operates off of a stroke color. So I'm going to start my line. I'm going to left click and drag across stage. And notice that if I grab the selection tool right after I create it, okay, this is made and there is no fill. Okay, it's entirely being built off of your stroke color. And if I lower the point size, I can take it down a little bit. I'm going to make another line tool. All right. I'm going to have two meeting points. I'm going to grab the direct selection tool, left click and drag and select these 2 points. Okay, this is pretty interesting. So I'm going to take this other point, let's bring it down a little bit so you can see it a little more clear. And I'm going to select these 2 endpoints like so to match up. Go on into Objects, Path, Join, and it will close and create a line between the 2 line tools that we just created. Voila. Go back in. Now with the direct selection tool, I can left click, drag, select, and select a point, and I can move it around and manipulate it. I create another line tool. I create it from here, select right there. Selecting both. Again, Object, Path, Join. Move it around. You can do it here too. Can reshape. Once it's made, you can even go back into the pen tool. Now we built a path using the pen tool. Notice that underneath the pen tool, if I click and hold it down, it rolls out a submenu. I can add anchor points, delete them. I'm going to add. I can add to this path I created just using lines. If I go back to the direct selection tool, those points are now made, so I can reshape this path. I'm going to delete this real quick. These tools right here, the add and delete, apply to anything. So if I go back to my rectangle shape that I just made previously, let's make another one. And I go to the add anchor point tool. I can add points to this rectangle. Go to the direct selection tool, left click drag, Make sure points are white so I can select specific points and I can reshape it. Fills can be applied at any time, so if I select my shape, I can always update to another fill color, just like so. Gradients are always fun. So if I select the shape and it has a fill, it can go into a window and turn on your gradient menu. Looks like this. If I select my shape, I can grab one of the defaults just to get started. Let's say I want to do the white to black gradient. I can do a different angle, so I can do a 90 degree if I want to. I can change it, so if it's selected, I can change my gradient color. Or I can double click on the gradient sliders and choose the color I want. Now, once I'm in this menu, I hit this little drop tab, switch to RGB or CMYK. I'll just do an RGB. You can find the color you want very easily. You don't have to do linear, but you can also do radial. Typography. It's so needed in design, right? So if I grab the text tool here and left click, type in text. Now grab the selection tool, hold shift, I'll click and drag the corner. And I can just scale it up. Illustrator allows you to just left click with the text tool activate on stage, type in what you want. Or if you want to create like paragraph text, I can left click and drag, create a text box to type into, and I can type text. However, once I grab the selection tool, it does not allow me to just hold shift and scale it because this is now a text box that you can type into. Okay, there's two ways to create text. Me personally, I like the first way. Just left click, tap, and then type in. Then it creates a selectional box around it. And just left click and drag one of the corners while holding shift, maintain uniform scale. I can take this text and just like what we learned, I can have this text selected. I can right click on it and go to create outlines, or other way to access it, just go to type, create outlines. And now this with a direct selection tool allows you to select parts of this text and manipulate it further, just like what we learned. Use the pen tool. Another thing about the pen tool, I'm going to delete this, is if I have the pen tool selected or any shape, I'm going to create a path here. We added points. I can also delete points if I wanted to, and this applies to any shape. So if I have that tool selected, left click on it, it will knock it out. I'm going to try a rectangle here. Let's see what it does. So I can create a rectangle with the fill black. Notice that's what we're creating. I'm going to select the delete anchor point tool and left click somewhere on one of these corners, and voila, knocks it down to a 90-degree triangle. Also found under the pen tool is the anchor point tool. So if I select it and left click and drag, I can shape those corners. So anything that has a hard cut, I can just left click, drag with that tool activated, and reshape it. Smoothing paths and shapes is pretty crucial too, because that's how you get your nice, clean, sleek design for logos. If I have a path here, let's say I'm just going to create a path using the pen tool. And let's say it looks something kind of like this. And I'm just going to go to selection tool. And with it selected, I'll just drop the stroke size down a little bit here. Let's say I want like 3. I can select this path, and I have a couple options. I can actually go into the shaper tool, also categorized as the pencil tool in other versions of Illustrator. I'm going to go to what's called the smooth tool, and if I left click and drag the smooth tool across this shape, notice how it smooths that shape down. Now I'm going to go ahead and just grab the selection tool and delete this. I'm going to actually create what's called, I'm going to use the same tool, the pen tool, to create hard edge shapes now, so you can see a little bit more clearly. Let's go back in and select that smooth tool. And there you go. It rounds off the ends, smooths it down a little bit, kind of refines it. Grab a selection tool and just select this and delete it. I'm going to use the pen tool and create another shape here with hard angles. And this time I'm going to select the shape and I'm going to go into this process, Object, Path, Simplify. Turn preview on, and notice that if I lower the curve precision value or increase it, I can control how I want that shape to smooth. I'm going to actually use a rectangle. Left click and drag and create this rectangle. Grab the selection tool. Left click, drag, select it. Make sure you do that process. Object, Path, Simplify. And I'm going to modify the curve precision. Notice I can drop it down and it'll smooth out all the corners for me very easily. Up the ante, I can get more and get it back to its 100%, how it had the sharp corners. Hit the magnifying glass, left click, zoom in, hold Alt or Option on your keyboard, left click, zoom out anytime, hold spacebar, pan around, and build all your content on the stage. Now another thing about Illustrator that's really neat is right now we've been building everything on one layer. If you're noticing, I have my layers menu open under Window, and I have layers turned on. Okay. When I build shapes on a layer, I build 3 rectangles here. Notice that they actually, if I click this down arrow under layer, they're all paths. Okay, so I can name my layers by double clicking. I can change it to say rectangle. And down here I can create another layer. Name this circle or circles. Let's go and create some circles here using the ellipse tool. I'm going to change the fill to a red, and we'll create circles on the circles layer I just created. Okay, I'm going to click on the selection tool, just click outside to deselect and open up its paths, and you'll notice that those ellipses are there. Now I can turn off the layers to hide materials or elements that are on my stage at any time and turn them back on, or with all the paths rolled out I can turn off individual paths, which happen to be the shapes that are built onto those layers. So if I don't want the circles at all, I can just select it, hit the little trash can, say you want to delete this layer, say yes. Alright. You can even lock paths on layers or lock layers themselves. So I can turn the lock on. Notice I can't click on anything on stage, anything that's under that layer. Unlock it, or I can lock individual paths. So I can lock this rectangle here, which is the third one. Can't click on it, but I can select the other 2. So same applies. Let's go ahead and delete these 2 here. Let's just grab this one rectangle. Let's learn about the appearance menu for logo design, which is pretty important. So if I go to Window and turn on Appearance, let's see how it's already checked. It looks like this. Here's the menu here itself. Looks just like this. So I'm going to select this rectangle, and notice that in the Appearance menu you have what's called a Add New Stroke and Fill option here. So if I have the rectangle, I want to add a fill. Notice that a fill pops up, and I can change the fill right here. That's pretty neat. I can also add strokes, so I can add a stroke to that, and it will appear on top. I can add what point value size stroke I want. I can change that stroke to any color, say I want a red. And what's really great about the appearance menu, I can add another stroke. So if I add another stroke, and I put this one on top of that stroke, I can change its color, so I can have multi-strokes on shapes. And I can say I want this point size to be larger than the other one. So if I put this red one, notice I can click and drag and drop. Put on top, that stroke will appear. And I can lower its size. And voila. So now I have 2 strokes for this shape. Let's go ahead and select what I don't want and just delete. I can knock them out anytime. Make sure you have the shape selected, though, when you're modifying. Like this. Okay. Let's go delete this rectangle. Let's try it with text. So I'm going to grab the text tool. I'm going to left click anywhere on stage. I'm just going to type in text. And it's going to immediately click the selection tool. It creates a control box around it. Hold shift and left click and drag that corner and just scale it larger. And then let's go ahead and add a fill to this under the appearance menu. So I'm going to add a fill option. And for the fill, I'm going to change this color. Let's say I want this text to be red. And I'm going to add some strokes. So I'm going to add a stroke. I'll do a black stroke. And I can add another stroke. So I can have multi-stroke text, just like shapes. So I'm going to add, and I can put the fill. It's wise to put your fill on top, and that way the fill is over the strokes. And I can have double stroke text. Right click on this anytime, go create outlines. And then you can even use the direct selection tool to modify the points if you want to modify it further. Same applies. Doesn't have to be fills, but you can also add gradients, just like what we learned. Back in the gradient menu, grab a default gradient, like so. Change its color values. Let's say this is my logo, and I want to export this out correctly and save it and bring it into Photoshop. Once it's all done, you found some awesome graphics to work with. You simply just go to File, and you save as. And look in here, what you'd want to do is actually, to save the AI file correctly, is you basically just go ahead and name this whatever you want. So I'm going to title logo. And see how it's an AI file? Well, that's the Illustrator file. That's the native file. That's your file that contains all the paths and layers that construct and build this logo. Now, that's the file you technically would use for yourself. And you send over that final file to a client if you're doing it for a client. But you wouldn't want to send, if you're working as a graphic designer or a digital artist in the industry, you wouldn't want to just send them the AI file. If you're sending, let's say, this file to another company who wants to put your company's logo into their ad, you wouldn't want to give them the AI file. That would be giving them the whole design. You can easily click the drop-down menu and select what's called EPS. Now, this also counts as a vector graphic, but it basically merges all your paths and layers into a single image, and then that's called the EPS. And that is a vector. You can scale it the same way, and you can give that to your contacts in the industry. Now I'm just going to name this logo and save this as a AI file just for this lesson. I'll just make it simple. Save it up to desktop. And this little message comes up. Just click OK. I'm going to launch Photoshop. Once you're in Photoshop, just go File, New. And let's say we're just basically making an 8.5 by 11, so I switch to inches. Let's say I was setting this up for print. I'm going to click OK. All right, you get a plain nice stage here to work with. And what you would do is if you want to place this logo graphic, then either the AI file, the EPS file, into a page, 8.5 by 11, let's say, or this works the same way for InDesign. You go to File, Place. So I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to locate it. Click Place. This little menu comes up. Click OK. And voila, it hits the stage. Now, if you hold Shift, left click and drag the corner, you're going to maintain uniform scale like so. If I hit Enter, it will place it. And then I can place it, position anywhere I want on my stage or inside my ad. Now, if I go Control T or Edit, Transform, Scale, basically, and hold Shift, notice that if I scale down, the quality maintains. That's because it's a vector. Now I'm going to scale it larger again. Watch this. Edit, transform, scale, hold shift, maintain uniform scale, scale larger, hit enter on my keyboard, and again, it's a vector graphics, so its resolution is maintained.